There's nothing more romantic than fantasy, and we can make the war on terror distract them like videos and TV shows with scantily clad women, cover them with oil, rub it in like lotion, put F-16s in the skies and battleships in the ocean. The voters won't notice. Tell them you're either with us or you're against us, and in the same breath over-vaccinate our soldiers. They'll want to believe these lies are the truth, to the point that even Cynthia McKinney with proof won't be able to convince them that there's a connection between the war on terror and the Carlisle group. They'll need to believe these lies are true. I said over-vaccinate our soldiers and coat their ammunition with radioactive DU. Fear is the final frontier of the defenseless. If it's logical, tell them it's senseless. You're either with us or you're against us. It's all about confusion. Name it the Patriot Act if it acts against the Constitution. One man, one vote is a joke. You should be more concerned about your family being broke. Poof. Mirrors. Smoke. Now, watch me raise spending and lower taxes. The answer to any question that the 911 Commission might ask is, we believe that stem cell research is immoral. North Korea has WMDs. Translation, time for Operation Iraqi Freedom. Sacrifice American lives on Baghdad soil. Earn more from our investments in defense and increase our supply of oil. The question is, how come we haven't done anything about the genocide in Darfur? The answer is, we believe in protecting the sanctity of marriage. Just give them a slogan. Let's roll. We're gonna smoke them out of their holes. Watch the hands. Watch the hands. In this hand, Osama bin Laden. In this hand, the World Trade Center explodes. Now, I know you want me to get them for you, but the $200 billion question is, how much is it worth to you for me to allow my cronies' investments in defense to work for you? Don't worry about what we knew prior to the fact about the attacks. That's a distraction. Carol Ann, look away from the oil fields. The important thing to remember is that voting for my opponent will get you killed. There's a connection between his election and your family's demise. That's why African-American voters have to be disenfranchised. Neo-democracy means the electronic voting machine companies get to help us decide. That way you can win the election and still lose. That's the new world order. Global economy, no borders, no sovereignty, widow's cries, corporate plutocracy, true lies.
Whites are so evenly divided that every time they vote, the race is so close, they have to go back and count the votes all over again. And which means that any block, any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse.
Black people are going to make the difference. When we vote, we win.
Gore, the winner in Florida.
All along, George W. Bush had been telling everybody, I'm going to carry Florida.
Florida has been prematurely called.
Not at all. I'm upbeat. I just don't believe we got enough evidence to be able to call the state. We're actually counting the votes.
On behalf of the State Elections Canvassing Commission, and in accordance with the laws of the state of Florida, I hereby declare Governor George W. Bush the winner of Florida's 25 electoral votes.
Florida goes to Mr. Bush. Just stop and absorb that for a second. Florida is going to go for Mr. Bush.
System is on trial. If the vote is off in Palm Beach County, what about the vote in Iowa? What about the vote in Mississippi? What about the vote in Alabama?
They try to turn people away, and it's not right. We need to stop all of this. No recount. We need a re-election in Florida tonight.
Please don't over-exaggerate the incidences that, the accusations.
I truly believe in my heart that if all of the votes have been counted in Florida, and if all of the African Americans had had an opportunity to cast a vote, George Bush would have never been president of the United States. We wouldn't be involved in a war in Iraq. And the makeup of the Supreme Court would be different.
I'm not a scientist and I don't know much about formulas, but someone is trying to create a formula. Maybe they've already created a formula. And if we use what happened in this past election, and if I stop people at the polls before they get to the polls, if this was to happen again, would it prove to us that someone has a formula?
Around 7 o'clock on the day of elections. That was when I got the first phone call telling me that something untoward was happening in Florida.
I was on my way to vote. There was a roadblock, and there were approximately 5 highway patrolmen there, and they stopped me. He asked me for my driver's license.
I present my voter's registration to the lady, and with my driver's license, she said my name wasn't on the paper.
What do you mean I can't vote? She said, you have been sent an absentee ballot, and therefore you can't vote.
The supervisor wanted to talk to me. We have you listed as a convicted felon. You have been purged from our system. You've lost all your civil rights.
One person, one vote. One person, one vote. Everybody matters. Every vote matters. Keep hope alive.
I was slingshotted into slavery. That's how I felt.
The suppression of the black vote is a key indicator. If we're stopped at the ballot booth, I think that the prospects for democracy surviving are quite dim.
The NAACP are calling on the Justice Department to launch a civil rights movement.
I don't believe the American people, even to this day, really understand what happened in Florida 2000. At every precinct, there's something called the voter list. And if your name is not on the voter list, then you're not allowed to vote.
5 months before the 2000 election, Jeb Bush, governor of Florida, and Katherine Harris, his Secretary of State, ordered the removal of 57,000 voters from the voter rolls. Supposedly, these were felons, criminals not allowed to vote. In fact, 97% were innocent.
And it just so happened that most of them on that list were Black and Latino.
I'm not guessing because I got a hold of the computer files. Next to the names are the voters' race.
Ms. Harris, you're aware of allegations that a private firm that you contracted with produced a list of purported felons who were taken off the voter registration list.
Yes, I am aware.
And you became aware of the concerns raised about the legitimacy of the lists that were provided by the private firm?
Yes, I became aware.
And what action did you take in response to becoming aware of those concerns?
If, again, I'm going to refer that to Mr. Roberts and that he's in charge of those day-to-day operations.
What specific actions did you take, Mr. Roberts?
In putting the data together, there were identified by the supervisors of elections a significant number of persons who had not committed felonies that were identified on the list.
Excuse me, Ms. Harris, when did you become aware of the concerns about the list provided by the firm?
Again, because our division director would have made me aware, brought this to my attention. I'll have to refer to him because I'm not certain of the specific date.
Okay, I'm trying to move this along, Mr. Roberts. You're not helping me out because I'm not getting a specific
I'm not
response.
trying to stall you. I'm trying to.
But you're not giving me the information we're asking. Please do.
It was important to establish for the record the role of all of the players in this debacle of democracy.
I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. The duties to carry out the election itself are not the responsibility of the governor.
So we understand for the record that as it relates to the November 7th election, you had no authority, no responsibilities, and took no actions with regard to the election.
In the preparation for the election?
Yes.
No, again, the Secretary of State and the 67 supervisors of election were responsible for that, and they carried out their duties.
Supervisors are in a precarious position here. We have a law that says that a felon cannot be on your rolls. And if I remove that person, you know, from information that I've received, and I've done it improperly, then I'm violating a person's right to vote. The law said that they had to verify this, but they were not taking it seriously. And you know, that could destroy a person's life. I received a letter saying that I was a convicted felon at my office. Yes, ma'am. And I am not a convicted felon.
Thank you very much.
I actually don't feel that the stories of disenfranchisement were that well covered by the media. There was a great deal of attention to punch card ballots and hanging chads. There was a great deal of attention to the political machinations. There was even a great deal of coverage for the soap opera litigation. But the stories of individuals who were aggrieved by what went on, that sort of went to the back burner and then ultimately just fell out of the story altogether.
Because there was no debate on the floor of the U.S. Congress, one Congresswoman, Cynthia McKinney, decided to hold her own investigative hearings in Atlanta, Georgia, the home of ChoicePoint, the company that created this list, and she dragged in the executives of the company to answer questions.
DBT was instructed to use very broad rules. These rules were supplied by the state when comparing names on the list.
What ChoicePoint admitted to us at the town hall meeting was that they weren't looking for exact matches.
Florida officials only wanted an 80% match on the last name. Now, the result of that was to capture the names of people with similar names.
If John Smythe was the convicted felon and John Smith was on the voter roll, well, John Smith became a convicted felon.
DBT told state officials that the rules for creating this list would mean a significant number of people who are not convicted felons would be included on the list.
And the state of Florida said, well, give it to us anyway, because we want that comprehensive, inaccurate list. ChoicePoint was paid $4 million. Were you supposed to verify the list?
No, ma'am, we were not.
So who exactly told you to provide a list that wasn't verified?
The state of Florida through their Division of Elections.
Okay. For something as precious as the right to vote, you would think that they would want to know that the person they're banning from the voting booth is the actual person who committed a felony. After wrongly identifying 8,000 Florida voters with Texas misdemeanor records as felons, it supplied a revised list.
Texas did not inform DBT that misdemeanors were on the list. They said it was a list of felons.
You got from the state of Texas a list of those who could not vote in Florida. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And who in Florida told you to provide those names?
It would have been the Division of Elections.
I just want to make it clear to the folks who are in here, if you think you thought what you thought you heard, and you don't believe that that's exactly what you heard, well, let me make it plain to you that that's exactly what you heard. What you heard is that highfalutin folks in Florida and Texas got together and decided that they were going to devise a way to make a list that would deny black people in Florida the right to vote and therefore produce the result of a stolen election, and which is what we saw now. I know I'm supposed to be nonpartisan when I'm in an official capacity, but it appears to me that that's exactly what happened.
Florida was an apartheid election, a Jim Crow election. That's what happened.
How do you make up for something like this? Do you, at George Point, feel any sense of responsibility of what happened in Florida? When you have a situation like Florida, it tends to discourage people from participating. People start saying, it doesn't matter. Why should I vote? My vote is not going to count.
The problem with this is that it was so in your face. We're gonna steal the election, we're gonna take over the levers of government, and there's nothing that the American people can do about it.
Secretary Cheney and I are honored and humbled to have won the state of Florida, which gives us the needed electoral votes to win the election. We will therefore undertake the responsibility of preparing to serve as America's next president and vice president. Bush, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office.
The Florida experience was traumatic. When you think about it, the right to vote is key to the whole constitutional democracy that sets us apart from any other country on the planet.
Telling the truth about the 2000 election set me on a course to telling the American people all that they needed to know about this administration. September 11th started out like any other work day for the average American person. People got up, shop owners opened their businesses. We all were getting dressed for work. Some of us were at work. Stores were open. And all of a sudden, I mean, the unthinkable happened. Eventually, we all came together and we were given talking points. The talking points said that we were hit because we were free, that we were hated because we're free. And it seemed that everywhere I went for answers, I got that mantra. That wasn't good enough for me.
And I thought you'd be interested in this. This is the outline of the 911 Recommendations Implementation Act.
Okay.
Okay. That's separate from the Terrorist Reform Act.
Okay. Some people are going to ask very safe questions, but someone like me, who's not an insider, who's not looking to be an insider, whose responsibility first and foremost was to the people and not to the system, someone like me is going to want to get to the heart of the matter, to the root, to the truth.
There's a certain political etiquette, I would call it, about what is proper to discuss and not proper. And if it's too difficult, it becomes over the pale. It becomes conspiracy nut stuff. It's not just the information you put out, it's even asking the question, which is not permitted.
Crossfire. On the left, Paul Begala. On the right, Tucker Carlson.
Time to reveal our quote of the day. Buckle your seatbelts. This Congresswoman is a Democrat from the Atlanta area. She is Cynthia McKinney, and she has a conspiracy theory you won't believe, hopefully. Here's what she told a Berkeley, California radio station, quote, "What did this administration know, and when did it know it about the events of September 11th? Who else knew, and why did they not warn the innocent people of New York who were needlessly murdered? What do they have to hide?" End quote. This is how the White House reacted.
All I can tell you is the Congresswoman must be running for the Hall of Fame of the Grassy Knoll Society. I really don't have anything to say that would lend any credibility to what she said.
I never alleged that there was any conspiracy. What I suggested was that there were warnings that came into this administration.
Now is the time for our elected officials to be held accountable. Now is the time for the media to be held accountable. Why aren't the hard questions being asked? We know there were numerous warnings of the events to come on September 11. Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, delivered one such warning. Those engaged in unusual stock trades immediately before September 11 knew enough to make millions of dollars from United and American Airlines, certain insurance and brokerage firm stocks. What did this administration know, and when did it know it? Who else knew, and why did they not warn the innocent people of New York who were needlessly murdered?
Her words were taken, put through a media mixmaster, and changed around.
Here you have Cynthia McKinney accusing essentially the president of being an accessory to mass murder and doing it for profit.
They bolted together two statements from different parts of a long interview and said McKinney said, didn't have McKinney on to respond.
We had President Bush place a phone call to Majority Leader Senator Tom Daschle asking him not to investigate the events of September 11th. And then, hot on the heels of the president's phone call was another phone call from the vice president asking that Tom Daschle also not investigate the events that led to September 11th. My question is, what do they have to hide?
The job was quite complete. Cynthia McKinney was accused of saying that George Bush knew all about the September 11th attack in advance, and that he kept it to himself to make sure that his buddies would profit from the wars to come.
I'm an African-American single mom from the state of Georgia. You know, I'm not supposed to question my country. I'm not supposed to question the behavior of my leaders, I suppose.
I mean, I don't care who was president or what it was not the time to do any of that, and that absolutely nailed my respect, you know, killed any respect I ever had for her.
It was a frustrating time for everybody. Somebody's looking for somebody to hate. We've still not caught Osama bin Laden. We couldn't take out that huge tragedy on anybody, so we started taking it out on Muslims, and then we started taking it out on Cynthia McKinney.
I'm asking you to question why my opponent has continued to vote against appropriations for military and intelligence support. If you want to continue to have the liberties that you have, you are going to have to make a sacrifice, just like my parents sacrificed, your parents sacrificed, and if you don't think it's worth it, then you need to move somewhere. And I'm not surprised at all at anything Denise Majek says. Remember, she's against the minimum wage, she's against affirmative action, she's against reparations.
She's always been viewed, especially by her Republican or white constituents, as being in opposition to them. Her focus seemed to be only on her core group of voters, which is basically black voters in South DeKalb.
I think she manipulates, the black voters, and plays a race card to get herself elected. Makes her, in my opinion, one of the dirtiest politicians there is.
I guess the Republican mindset had grasped onto Cynthia McKinney's 9/11 comments and used that to somehow say that she was un-American, that she was a threat to America. That spilled over into the media. A writer on the AJC had written a story about her contributor list, saying that she was taking money from terrorists.
The story that I did was she had her second best day in 5 years of political fundraising on September 11th. That's what the campaign disclosure said. The names on those lists are several Muslim people You know, I would be remiss to say I'd be worth much of a journalism about that if I didn't investigate that.
On 9/11, while the rest of the world watched in horror at the tragedy that was occurring across our country, you were counting money received from some people who have been named as Arab terrorists. How do you explain that?
We don't racially profile our contributors. All of our campaign contributions are legal. Now, my opponent, on the other hand, has an awful lot of Republican money going into her coffers.
I can't really complain about the way they handled the coverage because obviously I was delighted every time they slammed Cynthia McKinney. Were I a scholar looking at it, yeah, I might tend to be a little bit more critical.
The Republicans were after McKinney because she's a progressive African-American Democrat and was a very vocal critic of George Bush. The brains behind this was Mark Davis, a known Republican operative to who this day brags about this. See, they don't deny it.
This is a South Georgia wild boar, weighed about 200 pounds, from our hunting club on the Ocmulgee River. It was some of the best politics I've ever participated in, and I've been doing this for about 20 years. Our company does voter database work. We were involved in the redistricting effort for the Republican Party. We built a voter database that we used to map out all the new districts. It was drawn deliberately by the legislature to be a Democrat seat. And if we can't put a Republican in it, then the next best thing is to put in a moderate. I recalled the way that Republicans used to exert political influence when we were an extreme minority, and that was through crossover voting.
The primaries are basically for the parties to pick their own candidates who will run in the general election. One party cannot hijack the other party's primary.
Georgia's an open primary state. There's nothing illegal or even immoral about choosing to participate in one party's primary or another.
You have a choice when you go in of either taking a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot.
I pulled numbers for her district trying to see if there was any way we could beat her.
They knew a Republican could not beat McKinney, so they concocted the scheme to have their candidate, Denise Majette, run in the Democratic Party, hoping that she would get some Democrat votes, but knowing that would get all the Republicans to cross over.
What we were basically talking about was asking Republican voters to leave our primary and vote in the Democrat primary for a black female Democrat. It's a tall order.
It was very hurtful and painful to see an African-American female agreeing to be a part of that conspiracy.
Well, it's just another way to deny black people the vote. You figure out a way to trump their vote, and that's what they figured.
Black people were lynched in America years ago as examples so that no uppity black person or progressive white person would make a mistake. They lynched union people too. So one of the latest lynching, now done electronically, was of Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney.
All it took really was communicating to the community that yes, this was an organized effort, and that if they would cross over and vote against Cynthia, they'd be joined by thousands of other people.
I had received a mail out for this group, goodbyecynthia.com, and they were using the slogans, anybody but Cynthia, because I'm a white married male living in North DeKalb County, and they assumed I didn't like her either.
It shows her being erased, and when you open it, she's almost gone, and there's just a pile of eraser crumbs. The emails that we sent out were humorous. People forwarded those emails all over town, and it helped drive traffic to our site. They said every time they called somebody to ask them to cross over and vote against Cynthia McKinney, it almost seemed like people came through the phone at them saying, oh, I want to help, how can I help?
It's like going back to the all-white primary. There you have basically the same thing. The white Republicans are taken away from the black Democrats, the candidate of their choice. They're moving into their primary saying, we're not going to let you elect your candidate. We're going to dictate who your candidate is.
We have some very difficult days ahead. Don't sit here in DeKalb County and not think that more is before us, and that is the war in Iraq. And therefore, what are you going to do with this woman here? Where are we going to be without her? What are we going to do without her? can imagine what it's going to be. Don't let what happened in 2000 play out again on August 20th, 2000.
Knock on doors to bring out relatives that all might come to the polls to support and sustain her, that justice might prevail. We ask in Jesus' name. Let everybody say, amen.
The joke has always been up here when you go into primary day, you go either to the Republican table or the Democratic table. And the lines have always been long for the Republican table because we're so heavily Republican in these precincts up here.
You had polling places in Dunwoody where neighbors would walk in and high-five each other and giggle as they took a Democrat ballot.
There was basically no Republicans voting that day in DeKalb County. What can you say when you get about 5,000 Republican votes and 117,000 Democratic votes in a district that's 62% Democratic and 38% Republican? Clearly, the Republicans crossed over.
It was not a good day for me, even though I had to put on the face of being a good, happy person. Tonight, I lost an election. You won. But I maintained my spirit.
A lot of people had said it could never be done. And the morning after Cynthia was defeated, I sent an email out and I said, the kitchen is open at goodbyecynthia.com. This morning we'll be serving crow.
It's almost like people thought they had somehow strengthened America that day, that they had accomplished something. They had been misled into believing that they had gotten rid of a threat to the American way of life. To me, what they had done is threatened the American way of life.
I worked in hundreds of campaigns, and the work that I did in this one was pro bono, and I never made a dime. I viewed it as community service. I was on the waiting list for this for over a year, and got the second one in the Southeast. I do a lot of hunting and fishing, and it gets me in and out of the swamp, tearing up my vehicle.
In terms of the money trail from the National Republican Party or from the White House down to people like Mr. Davis, you may not ever see that. But this was something that certainly the National Republican Party really put on their agenda as a priority to defeat this woman.
The environment here in Washington was, as you said, anything that anybody could conceive of being against government or speaking out against the grain, you were ostracized. That was a fact.
It was a warning. They throw her corpse over the wall as a warning to others. They hang her from the tree because when they see her swinging from the poplar tree, every politician knows you don't ever raise these questions.
We're gonna see when you stand before the maker. Can you bring your big house and your fancy car and bank account? That's right. When you stand before this political lynching.
By the time it's in the papers tomorrow, you deserve to be the laughingstocks of America for this travesty that happened in Georgia tonight. Right. This was a travesty that happened. Right.
I tried to warn the American people of the dangers that I saw emanating from this administration. And sometimes I wonder what the progressive community in Georgia and around the country was thinking about as I ran my race. Even progressive journalists found it easier to join the bandwagon against me rather than to simply report accurately what I had said and done. Just think about it. Katherine Harris, who participated in the illegal disfranchisement of innocent Black and Latino voters, was rewarded with a congressional seat, and I was taken out of one.
People didn't wake up one morning and say, we're going to pass the Voting Rights Act. It was not out of the goodness of someone hard. But people struggled. People bled. People died. When I was growing up many years ago in Southeast Alabama, people could not register to vote simply because of the color of their skin. They had to pass a so-called literacy test, interpret certain section of the Constitution, pay a poll tax. And I remember one day standing there with about 60 African-American men and women to get a copy of the so-called literacy test. And the sheriff, very big man, mean man, he said to me, "John Lewis, you're an outside agitator. You're the lowest form of humanity." I looked Sheriff James Clark straight in the eyes and I said, "Sheriff, I may be an agitator, but I'm not an outsider. I grew up only 90 miles from here, and we're going to stay here until these people are allowed to register to vote." Then in another little town about 35 miles from Selma, a young man by the name of Jimmy Lee Jackson, involved in a march for the right to vote. A confrontation occurred. He was shot in the stomach by a state trooper. And a few days later, he died at a local hospital in Selma. Because of what happened to him, we made a decision, the movement did, that we will march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, 50 miles away.
We're marching today to dramatize to the nation, dramatize to the world, that hundreds and thousands of Negro citizens of Alabama, but particularly here in the Blackout area, denied the right to vote. We intend to march to Montgomery to present certain grievances to Governor George C. Wallace.
It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon. We started walking in twos, 600 strong, no one saying a word. It was so orderly, so peaceful. We came to the highest point on the bridge. Down below we saw a sea of blue, Alabama state troopers. We continued to walk. We got within hearing distance of the state troopers. A man identified himself and said, "I'm Major John Cloud of the Alabama State Troopers. This is an unlawful march. It will not be allowed to continue."
See that they turn around and disperse.
They came toward us, beating us with nightsticks and bullwhips, shrimping us with horses. I was hit in the head by a state trooper with a nightstick. Had a concussion at the bridge. I thought I saw death. I thought I was going to die. The next thing I knew, I had been admitted to the local hospital in Selma. Dr. King came by and said, "John, don't worry. We will make it from Selma to Montgomery. The Voting Rights Act would be passed." And he was right. 2 weeks later, we marched all the way from Selma to Montgomery. And President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law on August 6, 1965. The Voting Rights Act changed America, not just the South. But it changed America. It transformed Southern politics. When black people started registering and voting. So what happened in Florida and Georgia reminded me of the dark past. I just felt like I was living my life all over again, like I passed this way once before.
We are confronted with a new urgency. George Bush and Dick Cheney want another $87 billion for their war in Iraq. Your charge should be to protect the right to vote, especially for blacks and Latinos, whose numbers alone can take George Bush out of the White House and change the majority in the Congress.
Is participating on a panel whose purpose is to discover the truth dangerous? It shouldn't be. This is still America. And will I continue to do the work that I was doing before I left Congress? There's no way I can stop pursuing the truth. Citizen activism and citizen participation is always the answer. It's amazing that it's happening right here in New York City. New York City certainly has the greatest pain. And here, the most profound questions are being asked.
Nobody got the whole story of what happened in 9/11.
All I can say is that someone knows the truth. Someone knows the truth of it. Someone knows the truth.
And he's still in office.
Our quote of the day is a highfalutin "I told you so" about September 11th. Now, who would be in a position to claim that? Back in March, Democratic Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney of Georgia insinuated that the Bush administration may have ignored warnings about September 11th. McKinney now claims she's been vindicated and is the source of our quote of the day. I was derided by the White House right-wing talk, radio, and spokespersons for the military-industrial complex as a conspiracy theorist.
I think probably those comments would be seen differently now. On the other hand, I think that she probably still would have been beaten.
You know, timing is everything, and unfortunately, what she said really kind of came to fruition, but a lot of people didn't want to hear it. And now that they sort of know about it, they still don't want to hear it from her.
So while our macho commander-in-chief, from the safety of a presidential entourage who carefully scripted stage props, tells the Iraqis to bring it on, tonight we stand with the families, and in the most passionate spirit of patriotism, we say, bring the troops home now. The very act of our sitting vice president taking a paycheck from the American people while at the very same time taking one from a corporation that gets billions and billions of dollars in no-bid, sole source contracts should make us all outraged, and the vice president should blush. But these people don't blush because in the end, they know they can get away with it.
I'll be afraid for her sometimes, you know what I'm saying? Like she walking around with scopes on her forehead, with infrared green, infrared beams all on her dome, you know what I'm saying? Because it's dangerous. And that's why all them other dudes are scared, because they don't want to get crucified in the media like she did.
We have in our midst tonight a champion for justice. Say it now. For truth and righteousness. Yeah. We got somebody here tonight. That's right. Who is not ashamed of and not afraid of Halliburton and the Carlisle group. Let us rise to our feet to honor our
our right to vote and to deny our votes being counted. Florida became the rallying cry that it was because we flooded the system with our black ballot power.
Truth of the matter is that the media, large corporations, the people who control politically our country today, do not want you to participate. That's only bad for them. They want a low turnout of primarily upper middle class people. They want big money to dominate the political process. Their nightmare is that young people, lower income people, working people jump into the political process. They do not want that.
I want to be more informed about the whole thing because, like, a lot of my folks is basically like, fuck voting ain't shit. She the only reason why I even got into the whole electoral process.
Remember George the Daddy lost his job because black people voted. Remember Newt Gingrich lost his job because black people voted.
Yeah.
If you want this country to live up to its noblest ideals, we must state categorically and without equivocation that we are forced to be weaponed. I want to thank all of you for coming out this afternoon. I want to thank you for not giving up and not giving in when the going got tough. We've learned some important lessons, and one of them is how really important this congressional seat really is. We've also learned how important the truth is, because powerful forces are working real hard to keep you from knowing the truth. I've knocked on a lot of doors just in the last month. I've knocked on a lot of doors, and people are hurting.
They need Medicare, Medicaid.
Yes.
They need a job.
They need jobs.
I go to the rock of my salvation. I go to the throne that the village rejected. I go to the mountain. The mountain sheltered me.
The whole election was turned upside down when Majette made a stunning announcement that she would not run for re-election and instead run for the U.S. Senate. That prompted a free-for-all of candidates to jump into the race. What was supposed to be a two-woman bitter grudge match turned into pretty much a seven-candidate free-for-all, and no one would have predicted this.
We were suspicious of the poll numbers that were being floated in the local newspaper. We understand how influential the press can be. We knew that the environment was not going to be friendly and could quite honestly also be hostile.
DeKalb Emergency 911. Hello? Do you know this person? Where are they trying to get in from? Tell me exactly what happened. If the door is locked, the white male. Continue to stand on line with me, okay, until the police get here. Then I need to know who the heck this is that's accosting me.
I've had a little problem. An individual here legally on a student visa issued in Saudi Arabia was charged on Thursday night with criminal trespass and stalking. He had access to the telephone records of the campaign headquarters. He had called all over America, talking to people, saying that my life was in danger, I shouldn't get on any planes. He came to my house 3 times on Thursday, banged on the door. He wouldn't leave.
Banging on the door, pulling on the door, as if he wanted to get in. When we looked out this window, we seen his car parked sideways as if he tried to get away, but there's about 8, 9 police cars there. At that point, we were somewhat relieved.
I've been in this position so much. I was in this position when I first got elected. It wasn't quite this bad, but then it was only the Ku Klux Klan. You know, my son doesn't know that I live like this. I tried to get away from it over the past 2 years. There are more days where the blinds have been closed than there are when they have been open. For the brief moment that I was able to open the blinds and open the curtains and really let the real light come in, I thought that that was going to be the end of this kind of life. And now I'm back again to closed blinds and covered windows. That's my life.
It's now a day before the election, and McKinney is basically fighting the political fight of her life. When you lose your party's nomination, conventional wisdom has it, it's very hard to come back.
We can't take anything for granted. We have got to make sure that we have the turnout on Election Day.
And just as we discussed a little bit earlier, you're going to write down the number of voting machines and do a comparison with the number of registered voters for that precinct.
NAACP takes this process and procedure very, very seriously. And yes, we are also looking at the fact that we're in the South, and Georgia happens to be one of the 9 covered states under the 1965 Voting Rights Act. So we want to ensure that no infractions occur and everybody is allowed to legally do their duty, civic duty of voting.
That's the way the hackers hack, is through the phone line. So you want to make sure that you've got your vote total before they connect the machine to the phone line. Got it? Goodbye. I'll see you. And good morning.
I'm always a pessimist, so I'm nervous. It feels better this time than last time, that's for sure.
Well, I'd like to see a runoff at least. For a number of reasons, I'm not a Cynthia fan.
But I'd be surprised if she does well.
For Cynthia McKinney, she was right the whole time. Bush was lying.
If you go back as a freshman legislator, again, targeted by the Republicans, can you really be effective for this district?
I think that she's seen as being more of a troublemaker than somebody who could be effective.
The media kind of beat her down, you know, but she's a strong black woman. I believe she could win.
I like her. She seems to be very frank. My impression is that not many people will vote for her.
Hello, how are you? Thank you very much.
Back on the hill.
That's right, that's right. That's where we intend to go, for you.
It's a difficult election to read because it's not clear who exactly is going to show up. She probably has the largest and most motivated group of voters. She also has a ceiling in that support. And the question is, has that support eroded somewhat since her last run?
I'm hopeful that my vote will be counted today.
How hopeful?
Well, we're backing up my hope with a team of lawyers.
As the turnout numbers were coming in, we started to get worried because it was lower than what we had wanted to see. And these were her strong precincts we were watching.
163, 153.
872, 36, okay.
Polls opened this morning, one of them in particular I'm thinking about, with only 2 machines working out of 17 machines. Our poll observer was right on the case and made the phone call, and within an hour, those 15 machines were up and operational.
The Tilly Mill precinct was 106 Republican, 96 Democrat.
Okay, what about Chambly?
If there are any strange things from the numbers, then we start sending out field crews to try to knock on the doors. It looks like the crossover isn't as high, that we could tell. The turnout is heavily Democratic in the precincts we thought it should be. If the numbers are high enough, that I don't know yet.
When the initial tally came in, like 8%, it was Cynthia was like third place behind Levitan and Woolard. It's 9 o'clock. I just got a call from our guys at the headquarters. Cynthia has now moved up to second place, and that's only with the North DeKalb precincts reporting at this point right now.
Hey, what time is this about? Because you jumped up pretty good in the last 2 hours. They're coming faster now? Okay.
If she's in the high 40s, she's probably in a pretty good position to take the nomination in the runoff. If she's in the low 40s, she might be vulnerable.
It's now 10:25, and something beautiful just happened. Cynthia McKinney just went from second place, jumped up to first place with 50% of votes already in. We're very, very hopeful.
What we learned was, in fact, her turnout was good. And because she had people out in the street, because she was talking to people, because they missed her, her base came out, and they came out strong. They'd been misled, they had been duped, and they weren't going to allow it to happen again.
We're going to take 5 buses to D.C. We're going to tell them all she's back.
2 years ago today, I told you that Georgia's history train would keep on rolling. And tonight, the history train is on track. The people of the 4th Congressional District just took care of that with one of the greatest political comebacks of our time. I learned a valuable lesson during these past 2 years. The American people appreciate being told the truth.
This race was about civil rights. The last time, reactionary neocons came from all over the country to beat her. This time, progressive people came from all over the country to put her back in office.
Does the Democrat Party take African American voters for granted? It's a fair question. I'm here to ask for your vote. I know. Listen, Republican Party's got a lot of work to do. I understand that.
Thanks so much.
We're trying to get a picture. This is nasty.
Get a big book and make the news.
Yeah, exactly. How are you?
Can we meet and discuss this franchise? It's a big issue.
I got to clear it with your mentor, Roe.
Will you do that?
I'll talk about it, yeah.
We lost 1 million votes, and it's a lot of reasons.
That's a mistake.
So can we meet? I'd like to meet with him.
I'll let you know.
I'll call him right now.
All right. Roe.
Freddie.
Well, he's your mentor. That's what he said.
I'm in the same county your parents live. Odd county.
Yes, sir.
We will win Florida and Ohio. We will take at least 2
or 3 or 4 states that were won by Gore in the last election.
The W sign.
Let me just make it clear to you. We're not going to let this be a repeat of 2000. We're not going to let this be a repeat of 2000. We're not going to see 1 million African Americans deprived of their votes in America.
The anticipation of the results coming in tonight is going to fill everybody with kind of joy that this community hasn't had for a very long time. So now I am on my way to a precinct where we've had problems with provisional voting.
Hi, I'm Faye Cofield. I'm licensed private investigator. Okay. And there was a complaint that people were not being given provisional ballots to vote. Right. Are you not giving provisional ballots?
We haven't been given our authorities to do that. We have to call the main office and we give us.
No, ma'am. This is a federal election. Okay. And there are federal candidates on this election. I need your name.
Okay. Let me get.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Let me give you my card. Oh, yeah. Hold on. Here's my card. And here is my license. So you can.
We've had problems with the ability of voters to vote a provisional ballot if their name does not appear on the rolls.
And you're supposed to be coming back out.
Yeah, I'm coming out.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so can we? Oh, I know she didn't close the door in my face. I know she didn't close it.
The Secretary of State's office has said before a provisional ballot can be issued to a voter, that the Secretary of State's office has to be called.
You're in violation of federal law, and we've tried to talk to you about it, but you won't come outside. Nobody's gonna play with you. This is a person's right to vote.
Okay. What kind of micromanagement of the election process is this that ends up potentially disenfranchising duly registered voters?
And they will not talk to us. They wouldn't talk to me, but I told them I was gonna file a federal complaint, so we're gone.
We don't know if this is intentional obstructionism or if this is just callous indifference to the right of a voter. Am I ready to go? You ready to go? Okay. Well, a rare vote of approval from my mother.
Precincts reporting in the state of Georgia, President George W. Bush with a commanding lead, 62.6%.
I don't believe that.
Senator John Kerry, 36.5%.
Wow. I don't know where those people live. They on a different planet.
New Life Flat Shows 1026.
This is beautiful.
Crossroads 909, Memorial South.
Are you calling to see by how wide a margin I won? You better make sure you won. Well, it's not over yet. Naughty Dread rides again. That's our song. I'll wake up now. Uh-oh. This is totally incredible. The voters turned out in historic numbers and delivered a historic victory. The president told supporters. America has spoken. You have to give it to them. All you can say is they're good. They're good at what they do. We have to get better.
After the election in 2004, we began to get complaints from all over the country about things that had happened to people. We document them. But one state had more people calling in disgusted, sometimes crying, some dejected, some swearing they would never vote again. Ohio.
The black vote, which is so instrumental when our vote is counted, was again targeted in several ways. The longest lines, the most eliminated provisional votes, the most inconvenienced, the most victimized by precinct manipulation, with machines unused in warehouses. The machines were dry while the voters were wet.
The lines in the black precincts were 2, 3, 4 times as long as those in the suburbs. Now, some say, well, gee, that's just an accident. When you see that kind of an event, you better believe someone intended that. Now, why was that intended? Because somebody doesn't like black Americans? No. It's because black Americans have this propensity, statistical propensity, to vote 9 times out of 10 in support of a Democratic candidate.
I think some things are just really simple. You ask for my money through taxes. You want my son to die for you. You want my daughters to wave the flag. You have to give us the reason why. My vote and everyone else in this room and across this country must be counted, must be awarded that. If we're going to shed our blood and we're going to work every day in our laborious task. Now what are you going to do for us to keep doing that for you?
Too many young people decided that they were going to vote in 2004. These young people needed to have somebody say, I heard you. I saw you go vote. I know you turned out in massive numbers. I know you were disenfranchised, and I'm not going to let it go.
For what purpose does the member from Ohio rise?
In January of 2005, when the certification of the vote reached the floor of Congress, the Congressional Black Caucus said, you know, we're not going to put up with it again, and we're going to demand at least a discussion of what happened.
Since 2000, when we had so many problems in Florida, there's been very little opportunity to offer any type of legislation, any type of amendment in the Republican-controlled House. What are they afraid of? Why can't we have a debate?
Now, that doesn't mean that it became a national discussion because there was a virtual blackout on that extraordinary constitutional political story.
The clerk will report the objection.
We, a member of the House of Representatives and a United States Senator, object to the counting of the electoral votes of the state of Ohio.
But one senator, a white woman from California, Barbara Boxer, had the guts to stand up and say, I want to talk about what happened in Ohio.
So now it seems to me that under our great Constitution of the United States of America, that we swear allegiance to uphold, which guarantees the right to vote, that we must ask certain questions.
I couldn't believe it. It gave us the opportunity to have the debate that we needed to have 4 years ago.
In 2000, Democratic senators, even Al Gore himself, stood there with their mouths zipped shut while they watched an electoral coup d'etat in process and said nothing.
4 years ago, I didn't intervene. I was asked by Al Gore not to do so. Frankly, looking back on it, I wish I had. It really wasn't about Al Gore. It was about the voters.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Ohio, Mrs. Jones, for 5 minutes.
I thank God that I have a senator for joining me in this objection. This objection does not have at its root the hope or even the hint of overturning the victory of the president, but it is a necessary, timely, and appropriate opportunity to review and remedy the most precious process in our democracy.
They claim that they act on behalf of disenfranchised voters, but no such voter disenfranchisement occurred in this election of 2004, and for that matter, the election of 2000. Everybody knows it. The voters know it. The candidates know it. The courts know it, and the evidence proves it.
In the state's capital, a shortage of voting machines in predominantly African-American communities was created, even though the Secretary of State knew far in advance that 102,000 new voters were registered in that county alone.
knew going in there were going to be lines. It was one of those things where, because 102,000 more people voted in this election across the entire county, there were lines across the entire county.
Look at this. Columbus, Ward 1B, 1,175 voters in the year 2000, 1,620 in the year 2004. Voter registration up 27%. Machines, 2 are gone. 18% increase in registration. They took away a machine. 24%. These are all in Columbus. They took away a machine.
The accusation currently is that the deployment of machines migrated from the inner cities where they had been already placed out to more affluent Republican areas of town, and that this disenfranchised particularly African American voters and added votes to the Republican side of the ticket. So
in my affluent, predominantly Republican community, where 62% of the people voted for George Bush in the 2000 election, lines were not a problem.
I agree with millions of American citizens that no American should have to wait 4 hours to cast a vote.
This was entered into evidence by the Board of Elections. They have 2,866 machines available. Through a public records request, we found out that only 2,741 voting machines were delivered. What happened to the missing 125 machines, and where did they come from?
We did our voting machine placement, our allocation purely upon registration and past turnout statistics, nothing else.
This shows the machine allocation. Bexley, affluent, upper middle class suburb, right next to the east side of Columbus. No missing machines. Canal Winchester, suburb on the southwest side of the city. Again, no missing machines. As soon as we come to Columbus, where the black population is concentrated, where every elected official on the city council and the mayor are Democrats, somebody has taken the machine identification number and blacked it out. And then they blacked out another one. And then they blacked out another one. Take a look at what happens once you get into the inner city. Virtually every precinct here, somebody has come along and blacked out these machines. As we count it up, it comes to 125 machines. 74% of all the African American wards had less machines than in the primary. This list would have come from the Board of Election. The director is Matt Damschroeder, the former chair of the Franklin County Republican Party.
The state, using federal dollars, has to purchase one machine for every 200 registered voters. In Franklin County, had we done that for this election, we would have had to purchase about 1,500 more machines at a cost of $5,000 to $6,000 per machine.
There was a system of challenges set up by the Republican Party where they went out, like the Night Riders did before the Voting Rights Act, and said, that person shouldn't vote.
Say they need to get them people out of there. They trying to tell me how to vote. I already know who I want to vote for.
Suppose 500 blacks went into a white neighborhood to challenge their votes. It'd be totally unacceptable.
The election is over, and the results couldn't be clearer. Why are we here wasting time on silly, Hollywood-inspired conspiracy theories?
I wonder, I really do, I wonder if it were your wife who was denied the right, or your child, would you be making the same arguments?
And what happened in 2004 in Ohio was an ugly little echo of what happened in Florida in 2000. You had a Secretary of State of Florida in 2000, Katherine Harris, who basically reappeared as Secretary of State of Ohio, a guy named Ken Blackwell.
The provisional balloting process, we thought, would provide us an opportunity to assure that people who weren't sure of their voting location, who had been disenfranchised, an opportunity to vote.
Like I said, I lived in that residence where my address is for 20 years. The church that I've been going to vote is right around the corner from me. All of a sudden, I got to go from there and be inconvenienced to come all the way over here to vote, and I'm not even in a system. And they try to send me from here to go over there so that my vote wouldn't count for the provisional. What happened in Ohio was that our Secretary of State decided to make inconsistent rulings with regard to the use of a provisional ballot.
Blackwell made such decisions as, for the first time ever, if you go to the wrong precinct, we're going to give you a provisional ballot, and that ballot then won't count.
I got my card in the mail stating where I should go vote. I stood in line, I gave them my card, and I voted for the last election, and I always vote here. But this election, my name is not on the list, and I had to vote a provisional ballot.
Mr. Kenneth Blackwell, I'm ashamed to say an African-American man, has failed even to follow Ohio's election procedures, let alone procedures that comply with federal law and constitutional requirements.
I'm just photographing for election protection.
We're waiting in line to vote.
Okay, now we're walking down a path into the woods.
Earth to Barbara Boxer. George Bush has been freely and fairly re-elected President of the United States.
Blackwell, just as Katherine Harris did 4 years earlier, made a series of decisions on how the vote should be counted. Now you have to understand that Harris was the chairwoman of the Bush election campaign in 2000 while she was in charge of counting the vote for the state. Blackwell was chairman of the Bush campaign in Ohio while he's in charge of counting the vote. It's the same political fix.
Our ancestors who died for the right to vote certainly must be turning over in their graves.
Even if I let you in, they're not going to let me vote. That's okay.
There's something wrong with our democracy. More and more of our citizens are growing uneasy. And I hear people on the other side saying, you should get over it.
Gentleman's time has expired.
When people died for the right to vote, when people suffer for the right to vote, the right of every vote to be counted must be upheld.
Our Vice President has told us to expect war for the next generation. It is not only our responsibility, but our right to demand full democracy at home. And we do that by our actions today. This is not merely about bitterness or a recount. This is about a blackout. It's time to end the blackout and shine the lights on our precious right to vote.
So where's the outrage? Americans grow up with the idea that we are the great font of democracy. And we were, but we are no longer committed to it. We'd rather hold on to the myth than fight for the reality. You know, the Democratic Party saw the writing on the wall, but there was something else to it, which is that these are black voters. And we have an apartheid vote counting system in America. We have an apartheid political system in America and an apartheid news media system. If a subject is the black voter, it ain't a story.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you very much. See, all of this is new. All of this concrete and the flowers, which are a fancy barricade, the guard shack.
What? Who you guys with? Huh? Who you guys with? Who's she with? Congresswoman. Oh, I'm sorry. I was
That's just the typical kind of treatment that I receive. It's typical, so I'm not surprised and I'm not offended.
I hope not. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Some things never change. That's what Tupac said. When I got back to Congress, I got my seat back on the House Armed Services Committee, although I did not get my seniority as I had asked. The chairman is going to strictly adhere to the 5-minute rule so everybody can have a chance to ask their question. And they get almost to me, and then I hear Rumsfeld say he's got to go to lunch. And that a special accommodation had been worked out.
Absolutely. I took down the names of everyone who's left, and we'll get them down for breakfast sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Let's do that.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, the gentlelady's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would that breakfast with the secretary be open to the public?
Well, if you want to bring all the omelets, it might be.
Well, Mr. Chairman, there are many of us who have important questions, and my question in particular is about the 4 war games that were taking place on September 11th and how they may have impaired our ability to respond to the attacks on September 11th.
Well, let me say the gentlelady
I would like that question to be answered in public, Mr. Chairman. Okay, those chairs are in that hearing room because the public is invited to hear just exactly what the military policies and priorities of our country are going to be. And a private breakfast was not the setting for the public. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
McKinney has kind of a political Tourette's syndrome. You know, she just can't stop herself from saying the truth, no matter how much trouble it gets her in.
While all of this was going on, DynCorp kept the Pentagon contract to administer the smallpox and anthrax vaccine. Mr. Secretary, is it policy of the U.S. government to reward companies that traffic in women and little girls? That's my first question. My second question, it's not this genteel kind of back and forth where nothing gets done. I want to see my secretaries, my cabinet, respond to the real questions that I tend to ask. There are serious financial management problems at the Pentagon. Fiscal year 1999, $2.3 trillion missing. Fiscal year 2000, $1.1 trillion missing. The Pentagon has claimed year after year that the reason it can't account for the money is because its computers don't communicate with each other. Who has the contracts today to make those systems communicate with each other? How long have they had those contracts? And how much have the taxpayers paid for them? Finally, Mr. Secretary, I do expect the written response to my previous question, hopefully by the end of the week.
Usually politicians follow under massive firepower cover. She's out in front taking the first arrows.
The answer to your first question is no, absolutely not.
Well, how do you explain the fact that DynCorp and its successor companies have received and continue to receive government contracts?
There are times that corporations can get off of out of the penalty box, if you will, and be permitted to engage in contracts with the government.
This company was never in the penalty box. If you could proceed to my second question, please.
I've forgotten what the second question was.
I would like to have the answer in writing as well as I don't think I've demonstrated much caution since I've been back to Washington, D.C. Maybe that wasn't the smartest thing to do. But now there's a difference. I really don't have anything to lose. I've lost everything. They took away my job, my livelihood. They took away my good name. So why not stand up? Why not fight?
Cynthia McKinney may have the wildest image of all members of the Black Caucus, but her views are very serious and they are radical. That is, that they threaten the power structure as is. But she's not alone. Barbara Lee, John Conyers, most of the members of the Black Caucus, by reason of the people that they represent, have a quite different vision of America than the mainstream of either party.
It's those voices that
this mass disenfranchisement of black voters is trying to silence.
Challenging the Bush administration's actions in domestic and foreign policy and their priorities and the values is one thing, but the bottom line is that even that is already rigged if we can't count on our vote actually being counted and counting.
We know the truth, and we won't be stopped. So stay strong, my brothers and sisters, because we've got a lot of work to do. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time when people of conscience are compelled to dissent. We love our country, and that is why we dissent. Thank you.
I'm gonna vote, because it do count and it do matter.
Those people who say they're not voting because they're both the same, don't get out and vote, you'll never know.
If the people that's working inside the precinct is making it difficult for you, you have to do whatever it takes.
I'm a registered voter, and I ain't scared of none of y'all.